This week, Reverend Wendy begins a new series based on the book by Jean Houston, The Wizard of Us. Reverend Wendy looks at the hero's journey as it relates to the Wizard of Oz, and more importantly, how we are all on our own hero's journey. As part of this amazing introduction, Reverend Wendy takes a deep look at the meanings of the phrase, "There's no place like home."
So the title of my talk this morning is The Yellow Brick Road. Guess what we're going to be starting this morning? Guess. A series that's based on the movie and based on a book. The movie is called The Wizard of Oz. The book is a book written by Jean Houston called The Wizard of Us. So we're going to start a fun journey. So the Yellow Brick Road and the Wizard of Oz. So the Wizard of Oz was originally a book written in 1900 by Frank Baum, and I was told, I didn't know this piece of history tidbit, that he wrote it from the Hotel del Coronado here in San Diego. I did not realize that. So it was written in 1900 and then made into a movie in 1939. And it's rather unique in many ways that the main character in the movie and the main character in the book is Dorothy, a girl, a heroine. Don't have too many of those, not in the 1900, 1939. We need more of that, would you not say? And we're starting to see evidence and desire for those kinds of changes. And she's a heroine that accomplishes and is victorious, not by violence, not by force, but by her natural capacity to care, to cooperate, to be compassionate, to be loving. Don't you think that might be a better way to live as a human family on this planet? I think that deserves a round of applause as well. Yeah. In addition, another little interesting tidbit. So when I was putting this lesson together many months ago, I discovered that the ruby slippers that are prominent in the movie, though in the book they are silver, in the movie they are ruby, they are owned by the Smithsonian Institute. And the Smithsonian is in the process of raising $300,000 to refurbish these nearly 80-year-old ruby slippers. Is that not amazing? I watched the movie last night. I love my husband. He said, "What would you like to watch for TV? We need to decompress. We've had a very, very full weekend." And I said, "I want to watch The Wizard of Oz." And he looked at me, and he's well-trained too. And he said, "Sure, honey." So we watched the Wizard of Oz, and it was an awful lot of fun. So if you have not watched it for a long period of time, go ahead and watch it. One of the very first things that struck me is just as the credits open up, it says, for special effects, there is one person's name. Have you noticed how the movies today, the special effects credits roll for screen after screen, and then when you watch the special effects, you know, the flying cow, the tornado, it's hilarious, but it's precious. And it's, you know, all of these things. The fact that the Smithsonian has these ruby slippers and wants to preserve them for future generations. Is it really about the slippers? I don't think so. I think it's about the fact that this story it's a mythic story. As adults, we watch it and we see something different in it than when children just watch it as a children's story. It's a mythic story. It is filled with archetypes, and that's what we're going to study together as we explore The Wizard of Us. We're going to look at the different archetypes. And I love Jean Houston. I've had the opportunity to spend a little bit of time over the years with her. She's spoken here once before many years ago. I understand she's going to be in town this weekend at Seaside Center for Spiritual Living doing something. So if you want to connect there, you might want to check their website out. But Jean Houston is considered to be one of the founders of the human potential movement. She is a cultural anthropologist. She is a researcher. She is a scholar. She is a philosopher. She has this ability, both in her writing, which you'll see if you read the book, both in her writing and in her speaking, to pull from all these many different sources and areas that she has studied. She has the ability to pull them all together in such a way that she presents a new story of possibility for us as individuals to step into. She's very committed to some of the same things we are committed to in our unity practice, and that is discovering the truth of what we really are. Our seed self, our core self, our divine potential, and doing everything we possibly can to strengthen that and to express that fully and freely. And to the degree that we do, not only does our own individual life change, but to the degree that we do, we become a much stronger and more positive influence for good on the planet. So in case it's been a while since you have read the book or seen the movie and have totally forgotten what The Wizard of Oz is about, I want to tell you just a few of the pieces, and we'll explore some of the starting points in this mythic story, this hero's story. So of course it's a story of Dorothy, a young girl who is in love with her dog, Toto, but is not so in love with her life. She's not very happy where she is in Kansas. It doesn't seem like anybody really understands her. And she longs for something different. And through some series of events that we'll talk about here in just a moment, she gets the opportunity through a dream to experience a completely different journey and life. And she meets some amazing companions along the way that we'll be studying about as well, these archetypes. But it is so important for us as we go through this and as we remember these various pieces, that all of them point to something inside of us and can help us in our own hero's journey. That very term, hero's journey, was, I don't know if it was coined by, but it was certainly popularized by Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell studied about 240 amazing cultural stories that different cultures would grow up with, and saw that there were certain archetypical patterns in most all of these 240 stories. And in fact, in his research and work, he identified 12 very specific stages of the hero's journey. I'm not going to go into them here. Jean does a good job of that in the book. So we're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. And what does that mean? We are off to explore our own individual capacity for more potential and for greatness. You know, nobody signs up to incarnate in this life experience to be insignificant. Would you agree? We don't come here going, oh, I just want to live an insignificant life. No, we come here, it is imprinted in us. Jean talks about it, I think, using the term our entelechy, that there's something in us that just hungers and longs to express. There's something in us that just really desires to continue to expand and grow. And so we start this journey, and sometimes the journey feels like it is a mapless journey. We wonder, we long, well, how do I get from where I am to where I want to be? What is that journey? It's almost like there's a part of us, I think, that wishes, just give me an instruction book. And I'll read this instruction book. You know, just give me an instruction book so I know how to do it and I will do it. Well, we only get kind of an instruction book. And I think the kind of instruction book we get is in these mythical stories that describe the hero's journey, that help us to see ourselves in our own glory and in our own difficulty, and that help us to see the way others have moved through, that we might learn from the steps that they have taken. And so the Wizard of Oz is that great mythic journey for us. And as I've said, it's very unique in that at the center of this story is a young girl. And I think that should be held high in our minds, because I think it points to the value of and the importance of each of us, men and women, recognizing the power and the beauty and the sacredness of the divine feminine energy within us. And too long in our culture, not just our country, but too long in the family of humanity, we have buried the divine feminine. We have undervalued it. And we must begin to value it and to raise it up, because within the divine feminine energy are the qualities of cooperation and compassion and kindness and whole picture thinking. It is the heart, and we need that. By the same token, we also need to heal the wounded masculine within every man and within every woman, because both of these energies reside in each and every one of us. And when we can elevate and balance and recognize both and have both come into service in our lives individually and in all the ways that we make choices and decisions collectively, we will bring forth a world that works for everyone with no one and nothing left behind. So let us not ignore or undervalue the mythical and metaphysical significance of Dorothy being a key figure, the key figure in this story. It points to something that's so timely right now, that we need to challenge ourselves individually and collectively to bring a new kind of thinking to the issues and problems that we're facing in the world. Einstein said this when he said, "We cannot solve the world's problems on the same level of consciousness we had when we created them." So it means we need to find new and different ways of thinking and new and different ways of being. So we begin with Dorothy. In the movie, it's beautiful because the whole start of the movie, as you may remember, is black and white, right? And that is a symbol, that is a metaphor for how many of us start our hero's journey. Everything she sees, even the people look pretty gray and dreary. And it's to point to the fact that often when we start this journey toward something more, toward fulfilling more of our capacity and potential, we do it because there's some unrest that we're feeling. Things in our lives just don't feel or look the way that we want them to. And so the movie starts with everything being very gray. And of course we know what happens is Dorothy has had an interaction, or Toto has had an interaction with Mrs. Gulch. And Mrs. Gulch does not like Toto. And so Dorothy runs home and tries to explain to Auntie Em and Uncle Henry what had happened, and that Mrs. Gulch is threatening to come and take Toto away, and nobody wants to pay her any attention, really. They're all busy with different aspects of their life, and she's frustrated, she's challenged, she needs somebody to listen. Can you relate to any part of this story? Right? She's just looking for a friendly ear, and she's not really finding it. And then Mrs. Gulch comes and not only threatens to take Toto, but actually takes Toto from her and drives or rides away, and Dorothy is absolutely, totally heartbroken. Then Toto comes back out, gets out of Mrs. Gulch's little basket and runs home to Dorothy, and Dorothy is convinced she just has to run away. Have you ever felt like you had to run away? Just get me out of here, God. And if you do, I promise I'll do things much better next time. Right? So she just figures she can't stay in Kansas anymore. And so she just decides she's going to run away. And then there's a whole little bit of a story about how that doesn't work. And as she's coming home, of course, there's the most convincing tornado on the screen you will ever see. So compellingly convincing. And she's racing to get home as the wind is just fiercely blowing. And of course, Auntie Em and Uncle Henry are looking for Dorothy. They can't find Dorothy. They've got to get it in the protective shelter underground cellar. So they go in there, close the door, and Dorothy is left out. And she winds up being in the house, and the wind is fierce and the tornado is coming. And then the most convincing scene of the house being lifted off of its foundations, swirling in the sky. They didn't even get the scale of it right. It was really kind of funny if you watch it again. But twirling in the sky and plops down in a completely different land. Of course, it's because Dorothy fell unconscious because of the tornado, all of that. But now she's in this dream state. and her house lands with her in it and Toto in the land of Oz. And it opens to this beautiful, colorful scene. A happy scene, too. A happy scene. A scene with the munchkins coming out from hiding, so happy. And why are they happy? Because the wicked witch of the East is dead, and they are so happy because she's such an evil witch. And of course, Dorothy doesn't understand any of this, but she begins to sense what might be going on when Glinda, the good witch from the north, comes down and kind of starts to explain to her what's happened, why the munchkins are so happy. And Dorothy, because she is a kind and good person, says, I didn't mean to kill her. And the wicked witch of the west, the sister of the wicked witch of the east, is angry, threatens to kill Dorothy, threatens to kill Toto, and wants what from her sister, her dead sister? She wants the ruby red slippers. And the evil, wicked witch of the west tries to take those slippers off, and can she get them off? No, and what happens? Glinda magically makes those slippers come off, and where do they land? On Dorothy's feet. And she says to Dorothy, smart, she knows she's made an enemy. She knows she's got some problems. And Glinda, the good witch of the north, tells her, hold tight to those ruby slippers. They must be very important for her to want them so very much. Okay, here are some of the archetypical pieces in the story that as we start on this yellow brick road, we want to make sure we understand and we don't lose them. It's important for us to understand the significance, the archetypical significance of the ruby red slippers. It's important for us to understand that no sooner has Dorothy left Kansas, which she wanted, and now is in this other beautiful land, what does she want to do? She wants to go back home. Have you ever stepped out on faith into something totally new and different that you were absolutely guided to do, and it gets a little tough and scary there for a while, and what do you say? Oh, let me just go back. You know, for those of you who think the Bible is boring, it's only because you either had it hit over your head or don't know how to read it. There's some really cool stories in the Bible. The whole Bible is an archetype, an archetypical story of the soul's evolution. I don't know if you know that, but it's a story, an archetypical story of the soul's evolution from darkness to light. And we have the same kind of story in the Old Testament with Moses and the Israelites. All the Israelites wanted to do was to get out of Egypt and away from Pharaoh, and finally they are free. And as soon as life gets rough, for the 40 years they're wandering in the wilderness, because they neither had GPS and nobody asked a woman, or they would have gotten there. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. Couldn't resist. Don't send me hate mail. I really do love men. But no sooner are they out of Egypt that they're doing the same thing that Dorothy is saying. You know, it was better back in Egypt. At least we knew what the hardships were than out here in the wilderness. Boy, is that an archetype for what happens with us when we are really stretching and growing and unfolding. We experience some of these very same things. And so Dorothy asks Glinda and says to the Good Witch of the North that she wants to go back home. How do I go back home? And a really important piece that Glinda gives her right from the start is the idea that, well, you can get home, but you can't get there the way you came. Oh, boy. Don't miss that part. Don't miss that part. When we step forward in our growth, we're only fooling ourselves if we think we can ever really go back and pretend that we don't know what we now know. Once you know it, you know it. So we need to be willing to put on those ruby slippers. And what are those ruby slippers? Well, those ruby slippers helped Dorothy to get to where she was going and eventually get home, right? She wore those slippers every step of the way, right up until the very, very end. What does that mean? What does that point to in us? I think what it points to in us is that there are certain foundational intrinsic qualities or ways of being that are natural to us individually, that are the very go-to attitudes or practices that we use whenever we're struggling in life. The positive ones that will get us through. I was having lunch with a dear friend, member of our community that I have known for many years. And I have watched this woman. She has allowed me to enter into her life and share some of her life's journey and a lot of challenges, very real, genuine challenges she has had. She's a brilliant woman. She's a medical doctor. And in her sharing with me, she said something to me that absolutely fits what I'm talking about here with the ruby slippers. As she was talking about how she has managed through all of these changes and difficult experiences in her life. She said to me, what always is my go-to, what always carries me through is my perspective and my sense of humor. And I have seen this woman do that. And I am privy to the kinds of difficult places in her life where I know that it is those two things that she has pulled out, and that when I say pull out, she had to find something deep inside of herself to be able to do that. So your homework assignment, yeah, this is a fun series, but you do have homework. So your homework assignment is to be reflective and ask yourself, what are your ruby slippers? What are your go-to ways of being that you know when you put them on and have used them, that's what carried you through to the other side? I challenged myself to do that and found that some of what came to my awareness was absolutely obvious to me, and a couple of them not so much so. But as I reflected upon them, I thought, that's true. When I look at those difficult places in my life, personally or professionally, there absolutely have been certain things I've always relied on to carry me through. The reason I say get clear and find out what that is for you is when you can identify it succinctly and clearly, it becomes easier to pull it out when you really need it, and to challenge yourself to really show up that way. My friend knows this about herself. She knows it's her perspective and her sense of humor that is going to get her through those tough experiences. So when she's in those experiences, those are her go-to things. So what is that for you? And it's not just to be used through the tough experiences, but through the joyful, strenuous experiences of growing. What is going to be your go-to? So that's the first. The second is recognizing that there is a path stretching out before you. In the movie, it's a beautiful what? Yellow brick road. It's a beautiful yellow brick road. It's stretching out before you. You probably don't see all of it. Dorothy, at that scene in the movie, gets to see some of it, but she doesn't get to see all of it. And it makes twists and turns, and we'll go into some of those in subsequent weeks. But recognize that there is a path stretching out before you. And I would go so far as to say it is your unique path. It is your unique path. It may not look like anybody else's path. It is yours. It comes out of your very essence. It comes out of your soul. It comes out of everything that you brought with you into this life experience. You have a very specific texture, feel, pace, look to the path that is yours that's stretching out before you. Third, be willing to start where? Right at the beginning. Right at the beginning. Right where you are. It is so tempting to want to start somewhere else. Do I have to start at the beginning? Yeah. How many of you ever took up a sport, a brand new sport like tennis or skiing, or raise your hand? How many of you, when you took up that brand new sport, had an image in your mind of somebody who did that sport and did it really well, right? And how did you want to be the very first time you put on those skis or took that tennis racket? You didn't want to be the way you probably were, right? You wanted to be like that person that inspired you. You thought, wow, how can they hit the ball like that? Or how can they ski like that, right? But where did you have to begin? Yeah, and it's not necessarily so romantic, is it, or so juicy or so exciting or anything like that, but you gotta start there. And it means working the best you can with who you are, what you know, and what you have, right where you are. No complaints. Boy, that could be a big one. We'll do a series on that. No complaints, no excuses, but just right here, okay, the best I can, right at the beginning, trusting that with each step forward I take, a little more of my unique path will be revealed to me. And the last is be willing to start alone. Be willing to start alone. Have something that you can think about that gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling, like Dorothy had Toto, but she really was starting that journey alone. So realize that when we start this process of self-discovery, when we start this process of tapping into our greater potential or our innate entelechy, that it's an individual journey. We started alone. Along the way, we will pick up others. But in the beginning, the decision to start is a solo decision. So there's great homework in her book, The Wizard of Us, and there are in every chapter, Jean has excellent practice exercises and processes. I'm not going to share those each week. So if you really want to take this hero's journey fully and deeply, you'll probably want to look at the book and do those exercises on your own. Each week we'll work with an affirmation, and so we're going to take one right now. It's a simple one, and hopefully we'll work with, each of us will use it each and every day. And then I want to close with a piece that's very timely from the introduction of the book that Jean wrote. But our affirmation is, I commit to my hero's journey. Together, I commit to my hero's journey. And again, more softly, I commit to my hero's journey. And ever so quietly, I commit to my hero's journey. Let me close with some words from the introduction of the book from Jean. And they're so timely. They are so timely. I don't know how it is for you, but one of the things that continues to motivate me to never give up on doing my spiritual practice and my work is that sometimes I don't feel like doing it for me. But what I know is, to the extent that I will keep doing it, a changed and better me helps to make a changed and better world around me. And that motivates me to never, ever, 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 ever give up on the practices and the principles that we hold near and dear in unity. So this is what Jean writes in the introduction. The Wizard of Oz is a mythic tale, especially appropriate in our present time as we move into a planetary culture. This is a world mind. There is a world mind that is rising. By that, I mean that nations can no longer afford to be islands unto themselves. The days of isolation and domination are over. We are all connected. What happens in one place quickly affects us all. In these accelerated times, we are being called to expand our ways of being, to open ourselves to cultures of other countries, to learn as much as we can about each other and the earth itself so we can all thrive. We stand on the brink of a new way of being that is so much more than we previously imagined. The Wizard of Us, traveling mystically, mythically in Oz, is a primer for training the mind to see the world in its diverse and simultaneous truths. In these chapters, we identify the symbols of the universal myth within. By doing so, we begin to live deliberate lives that actively connect the codes and symbols of our shared mythic story to our increased understanding of our connection to and within the world that now requires a shift from us. Namaste.
Thanks for listening. The Unity Center, transforming lives and healing our world. Check us out Sundays at 9 and 11. Subscribe to our podcasts and download our free app for instant access to a wealth of spiritual teachings, services, and events.